1,000 years ago, on a muddy street in England, a man watched his wife turn her head. Not at a warrior, not at a king, at a Dane walking past, hair combed and clean, beard oiled. And the man beside her felt something cold turn in his stomach. We know this happened because an English monk was bothered enough to write it down. Not a raid, not a massacre, a complaint that the enemy was too well groomed and that Englishwomen had noticed. Everything you have been told about the dirty, lice-ridden Viking is about to fall apart. And then, when you are sure you have the truth, it is going to turn again. You know the picture. The Viking as a filthy brute, matted hair, rotten teeth, a fur-wrapped savage who smelled like the animals he slept beside. It is the version Hollywood sells, and it feels right, because these were raiders and killers are not supposed to be vain. There is just one problem. The picture is backwards. The evidence is not in the sagas or the legends. It is in the ground, in thousands of Viking graves and settlements dug up across northern Europe. And when archaeologists open that ground, they do find the swords and the axes you would expect. But lying right next to them, again and again, in graves of warriors and farmers and women alike, is something that does not fit the savage at all. It is the single most common personal object the Vikings left behind, and it is not a weapon. It is a comb. Wherever the Norse went, the comb followed. They turn up in Scandinavia, in England, in Ireland, in the trading towns along the rivers. Most were carved from red deer or reindeer antler, cut and riveted into a tool built to last. A man wore his comb on his belt, beside his knife and his sword, close to hand all day. And when he died, it went into the grave with him. Because in the Norse world, you were buried with the things you would need on the journey ahead. A sword for the fight, a comb for the hair. The comb was only the start. In graves at Birka in Sweden, archaeologists found whole grooming kits, bronze tweezers for pulling stray hairs from the beard and the brow, a small scoop called an ear spoon for cleaning wax from the ears, nail cleaners. Often these tools were strung together on a single ring, a complete personal kit a Viking carried with him the way you carry keys. This was not one vain chieftain. This was ordinary. This was daily. And it was so deeply fixed in how these people lived that it left a mark on something you still use every single week. Look at the word for Saturday. In Old Norse, Saturday was laugardagur. Break it apart and it means wash day, the day of the bath. And it did not vanish with the Vikings. In Sweden today, Saturday is still lördag. In Norway and Denmark, lördag. The same word, the same meaning, 1,000 years later, hiding in plain sight on the calendar. Think about what that tells us. Every other day of the week was named for something vast. The sun, the moon, the gods, Tyr, Odin, Thor and Frigg. And then there is Saturday, the only day named not for a god or a planet, but for a chore, for washing. The weekly bath was so central to Norse life that it earned its own place in time. And the bath was not just about getting clean. It was a gathering, a day to meet, to trade news, to settle small business in the warm water and the steam. Once a week, every week, while much of the world around them washed far less often. This is the routine that was about to put the Vikings on a collision course with the people of England. Which brings us back to that monk. His name comes down to us as John of Wallingford, and he recorded that the Danes living in England combed their hair every day, bathed every Saturday, and changed their clothing often. And the result, he wrote, was that they made themselves far too attractive to Englishwomen. In his words, they laid siege to the virtue of married women and even persuaded the daughters of nobles to take them as lovers. Now here is where we stay honest. John of Wallingford was writing in the 13th century, more than 200 years after the events he describes, so he was no eyewitness. And as an English monk writing about the old enemy, he had every reason to paint the Danes as seducers and corrupters. We should not take the spice of it at face value. But strip the outrage away and a simple thing remains. A grudge this specific does not come from nothing. The English remembered the Northmen not only as men who burned monasteries, but as men who were noticeably, irritatingly well kept. You do not invent a complaint about your enemy being too clean. You make it because it stung.
So that settles it. The Vikings were the best groomed men in Europe. Except, before you crown them, there is a man who actually watched them wash, and he had a very different word for them. Around the year 922, an Arab diplomat named Ibn Fadlan travelled north and met a group of Norse traders along the Volga River, the people he called the Rus. He admired their bodies, tall and strong as date palms, and then he watched their morning routine, and he was horrified. Every morning, he wrote, a servant girl brought a single basin of water to the leader. The man washed his face, his hands, and his hair in it. Then he blew his nose into the same water and spat into it. And when he was done, the girl carried that same basin to the next man, who did the same, and the next. One bowl of water passed from man to man until the whole company had used it. Ibn Fadlan called them the filthiest of God's creatures. So which is true? Were they the clean ones or the filthy ones? Both, and here is why they do not cancel out. Ibn Fadlan was an outsider, judging by the standards of his own faith, where washing demands fresh running water, never a shared and reused bowl. By that measure, the Rus failed completely. He was also telling a good story and may have sharpened it. Both things can be true at once. A people can comb their hair daily and still share a wash basin a Muslim diplomat would find revolting. And there is one more honest crack in the legend. In the old Viking city of Jorvik in York, archaeologists recovered preserved human waste packed with the eggs of intestinal worms. Combs and clean hair did not mean clean insides. Grooming is not the same as understanding disease. So picture that English street one more time. These were not clean men by our standard, with hot showers and soap and germ theory. They were not clean by Ibn Fadlan's standard either, with his fresh running water. But by the standard that actually mattered, the standard of the people walking past them in England, they were something striking. Deliberately kept, combed, bathed, and dressed with a care that the locals noticed and resented, and could not stop their own wives from noticing too. That is why a monk still bothered to write it down, 2 centuries after the fact. The comb in the grave was never really about being clean. It was about identity, about pride, about a people who carried a piece of who they were on their belt, right next to the blade. The Vikings conquered with the axe, but they unsettled England with a comb. In the next film in this series, we take on another myth Hollywood handed you, and like this one, the truth is stranger than the legend. Make sure you are here for it.